Hello and welcome to Just One More Watch. Sequels can be a tricky business, not the guaranteed cash cow that many people think they are. I mean, let's look at some movies for an example. For every Aliens, there's a Lost Boys 2. For every Mad Max 2, there's a Highlander 2. And for every Terminator 2, there's a Mean Girls 2. What? I love Mean Girls, so fetch. So the pressure is on Casio then to come up with a decent sequel to the EFV 100 range, aka the Casio Aqua Terra, a watch that I think has sold a lot of units and has been a bit of a hit for the Edifice sub-brand. I reviewed the EFV 100 at the beginning of last year and the EFV 560, which is the chronograph equivalent, at the beginning of this year. I'm delighted to be able to look at the EFV 140 and 630, their two follow-ups released earlier on this year. You saw the pop-up. This video is sponsored by Casio Australia. They sent me the watches in for review, but do they have a Godfather Part 2 on their hands or a Jaws the Revenge on their hands? Let's flip the camera and find out. Alright, while I get into the boxes, they've sent me various colour versions of both of the watches today. Let's talk price. Because this is a Casio Australia sponsored video, the links I'll leave in the description of the video will be to their website, and the prices I talk about today are Aussie prices. These are available worldwide with corresponding worldwide prices. I'm sure you can work it out. The price of the three-handers is 159 Aussie dollars. The price of the chronographs is 189 Aussie dollars. So about $30 or 20% difference between the two watches. Do bear in mind that these are also available on leather straps. They only sent me the braceleted versions, but there are a number of different colour variants only available on leather in three-hander and also the chrono. I think this may be the pick of the bunch. Black and gill on black leather. That is tasty. So the three-handers are the EFV 140s, the chronos are the EFV 630s. I will show you all different colour variants, but for expediency, I will concentrate on the blue three-hander and the green chrono. They are, however, essentially the same watch. It's the same case, crown, bracelet, and exactly the same dimensions on both of these models. So what are we going to do? Have a look at all of these new ones, compare them to the old ones, and then I'll tell you which I prefer, the original or the sequel. So they really have built on the whole Aqua Terra look that started with the EFE 100s and the 560s, the older models. They've gone even more Omega because they've added horizontal stripes to the dial, plus there's a sunburst here, some really nice touches of colour here and there. Like I said, both the chrono and the three-hander have identical dimensions, those being 42mm in diameter, bang on 11mm thick with a 49.5 lug tip to lug tip. Slightly awkward 21mm lug width, bit of a taper down to 18, back up to 19.5 at the clasp, sized up for me, 7-inch wrist, both watches weigh identically, 120 grams on the nose. Stainless steel, case, crown is a push-pull crown on this model with 100 meters of water resistance and a stainless steel press-on case back, fixed high polished bezel on this one. Now, it is a big Japanese brand watch with a metal bracelet for around $100 US, so you know what you're getting here. You are getting hollow end links and rolled links, though they disguise that very well. You are also getting a pressed upper, pressed lower clasp with double triggers. Nice Casio Edifice stamped there, the logo there, and 4 holes of micro adjust though, so you do at least get a decent fit from the cheapish bracelet. Now the new model continues to have that really nice elegant side profile of the old model, very reminiscent of the Seiko Sarb as well as the Omega Aqua Terra. The fact that it points down means 49.5mm lug to lug, it actually wears a bit smaller than that on wrist. High polished side and a circular brush finish to the upper lug surface, high polished bezel as mentioned, and an all brush bracelet, so they have done away with the high polished mid links. Personally, I approve of that because I have an Omega Aqua Terra and I did away with the high polished mid links. I got them brushed out. This model Casio means you don't need to, they've done it for you. Neat little crown guards on the opposite side, and the Edifice logo is etched into that 5mm crown. Stainless steel case back is the same on all models. Again, that triple branding, the Edifice logo, the Edifice brand name, and Casio are deep etched in there, as is the model number and stainless steel. Module in this one is a 5507. Module 5507 is a standard Casio 3-hand plus date that features in a lot of the Edifice range, including the EFV 100, this watch's predecessor. Battery life of 3 years and accuracy of plus or minus 20 seconds per month. And yet again, it's another budget Casio that hits every single marker. I have seen far more expensive Swiss watches that can't do that, and yet Casio seem to do it on every model that they release. The chrono module is a little more interesting. It's a 5434 and is different from the module featured in the EFV 530. The date has moved down to 430 and it's a 369 layout rather than the 1296 layout of the previous model. Ticking central second, 30-minute chrono timer. That's your 60-second chrono timer here, and a 12:24-hour indicator at the 3 o'clock. Standard chrono operation, one push of the top pusher to start the chrono. You can see that little sub-dial down there jumping into action. You can also see that the seconds are not marked, only 5 seconds. You can also see that the minutes are not marked, only 2 minutes. So if you are using this one to time small increments, you are going to have to pay attention. You are going to have to read between the lines, so to speak. One feature that I hadn't realized before is it has a lap timer. If you press the bottom pusher, the reset button, it will hold until you press it again, in which case it will catch up. One push of the top pusher to stop, bottom pusher again resets, and it's a slow reset back to 0. Alright, that's the basics out the way, but really the interest here lies with these new dials, this new kind of horizontal striping, aping the look of the Aqua Terra even more than the previous model. So here's all three variants side by side. Structurally they're identical, only differences are the colour. The green has a little bit of red in the second hand, and also the WR100 printed above the index at 6. The blue has a pale blue for the second hand and the water resistance rating, and the black one has a grey second hand and grey text for the water resistance rating. And I must say, these new dials and the detailing that goes along with them are far nicer than the old plain ones, and definitely amongst the nicest dials you can get on any watch at around the $100 mark. Not only do they feature that etched horizontal striping, but there is a degree of sunburst on all of them also. The Casio Edifice triple branding sits underneath the index at 12 o'clock, that WR100 above the 6, and Japan movement either side of the triangle at 6 o'clock. But that's it, there's nothing else here to clutter up these dials. They look great. The applied indices definitely help with that. All truncated triangles with white center sections and beveled high polish edges. Again, really nice to see this level of faceting and complication on the indices of a budget watch. The date complication at 3 is nicely done and features beveled edges, as do the high polished silver handset, though I must say the broad arrow hour hand isn't as broad as it used to be on previous models. They have thinned that down and refined it a little. Some will prefer the old one, some will prefer the new one. I'm somewhere in between. On to the chronos. Now the chronos don't get the horizontal striping that the three-handers get, but they do get the same handset, they do get the same colours of the hands and the printing on the dial, and they do get identical indices also applied, also faceted. Each of the newly relocated sub-registers has a silver surround, and the relocated date complication down there at the 430 also gets a beveled edge and a colour match date wheel. Now looking at those split indices with the silver edges, you would imagine that the white centre section was loomed, wouldn't you? But unfortunately it isn't, and you'll have to take my word for it. That's a chrono on the right and a three-hander on the left, because they haven't loomed any of those sub-register hands either. And the loom is, well, it's there initially, but if I turn the speed up on these ones by 5 minutes, yeah, it's not really there. By 10 minutes, it's all over. I'm going to cut it short. But on wrist they wear very well. Visually, it's quite a big watch because the dial is so big. There's a chapter ring there with 60, 15, 30 and 45. Just little rectangles at the 5-minute markers. But it's quite steeply angled, so again, it's not occupying too much of the dial space, giving the impression of quite a large watch. Nearly 50mm lug to lug also gives the impression of quite a large watch, but when you see the side profile, it does tuck back in towards the wrist and then tuck down the wrist at the edges, plus 11mm thick, 120 grams. Yeah, that definitely helps the way this one wears. And oddly enough, the chrono wears absolutely identically to the three-hander because all of the structural components of the watch are identical. Overhead legibility is actually really good on these watches, again because of the size, because of the dial, and because of the reasonable length of the handset. Now, flat mineral crystal only with these ones. You do get a bit of bounce back under my studio lights, you always do with flat crystals, but it isn't too bad inside or out. Outside with the three-hander, you can see those horizontal stripes even more in natural light. You can also see just the mildest sunburst effect from this stripy dial. No such sunburst on the chrono, just a flat matte dial, but you do get those nice circular surrounds to the sub-dials glinting nicely in the sunshine. On wrist, I'm definitely a fan of the move to brushed mid-links. I think there's enough bling with that high polished bezel, especially with these new stripy dials on the three-handers. You don't really need the extra sheen that used to be on the polished mid-links anyway. Looking down the wrist, nice and slim, great case profile on all of these watches. Definitely shirtable, definitely office wear here, particularly with the angle on the bezel. You'll have no problem slipping this one under a cuff. And the pocket shots to finish on both watches, like I said, they are identical in terms of the dimensions and within 1 gram of each other. So which one you pick is entirely up to you, what look you prefer and how you're going to be using this watch. Alright, let's do some side-by-side comparisons then between the original and the sequel. Clearly the biggest difference here is the size. The new one is a 42, whereas the old one was available in either 40 or 35. Maybe they will shrink this horizontal dial. The next biggest difference, maybe they will put that lovely dial into a smaller 40mm case at some point. We shall see. The dial though is really very good. Like I said, not just good for Casio Edifice, I think it's good for any watch at or around the $100 price point. There do, however, seem to have been some compromises made to facilitate the shift to those new dials. For example, the old watch has a screw-down crown and a screw-on caseback. The new watch just a push-pull crown and a press-on caseback. And the new watch may share the old watch's elegant profile, but it doesn't share its complex finishing. Old watch, brush polish, new watch, brush polish. I am, however, a big fan of the move away from polished mid-links and towards brush, and 4 holes of micro adjust rather than 2. New chrono, old chrono then, and lots of visual differences here because of the change of movements. The old chrono only had a push-pull crown, so no loss in that regard. I prefer the new layout. I think 369 is much neater and more symmetrical, clearly, than 1269. The branding looks good up there on the new one. It always looked a little bit awkward there on the old one. The shift to the date complication down there at the 430 is slightly awkward in itself, but at least they have compensated by properly colour matching that with a green date wheel, which is very nice on a watch at this price. The move to a slightly more slender handset on the new model, can't help but feeling that they may have been better retaining and just carrying over the old ones. Slightly bolder, slightly better fitting to the size of the dial. So what Casio Edifice do I prefer then? Do I prefer the sequel or the original? Well, when it comes to the three-handers, as nice as this new dial is, and it really is very nice, I still prefer the older 100 model. Primarily because it's a 40 and it fits me better, but also because that case finish, yeah, it is noticeable between these two in particular. In terms of the chronos though, I prefer the new model. I think that is a much nicer layout, and I love that colour match date wheel, a real rarity on a watch at this price. The good news is, just like movies, you don't have to pick between the original and the sequel. You can watch both because they're still selling the old models alongside the new models. So all they've done here really is give us all more choice as consumers. So just like with movies, it doesn't matter whether the sequel is a cracker or a turkey, you can still watch the original if you prefer it anyway. So there you have it, the new Casio Aqua Terra, no better and no worse than the old one. You pick the one you like based on looks, based on size, and based on what is important to you. If you're keen on the older one though, definitely check out my review. Similarly, check out my review of the chrono version as well. Thanks for watching. See you soon.